The iPhone XR in 2024 is kind of an interesting place. It's new enough where it still gets the latest iOS updates, including iOS 18, yet it's old enough where it really may not be the smartest decision to hold on to this for a few years. But I can tell you this though, the iPhone XR in 2024 is definitely still usable, and I'm going to show you, as well as some buying advice you may want to be aware about before picking up a used iPhone. For example, the iPhone XR may not be the right budget iPhone to get for under $200. So here's a quick backstory with the iPhone XR. It was released at the end of 2018, and it was Apple's attempt to make a more budget-friendly option from the iPhone 10 redesign that came the previous year. And their idea worked really well. The iPhone XR sold 46 million units in 2019, and at the time it retailed for $750, but now you can find these for roughly $170. These prices can change though, so I will leave a link down below if you're interested in what the current price is. The iPhone XR has this rounded look that I can find throughout every design feature of the phone, and it makes this phone really comfortable to hold in the hand, especially compared to the more boxier designs of the newer iPhones. On the left hand side, you have your two volume buttons and a mute switch, and on the right hand side, you have your power/Siri button. On the bottom, you have your speakers and a lightning port, which lightning is still fairly common now, even though the new iPhones have USB-C. The back is a glass back so it can wirelessly charge, and they have one camera sensor. It's IP67 water resistant, so if you get water splashed in it, it's going to hold up. And it comes in red, yellow, white, coral, black, and blue color options. The screen on this phone is a 6.1-inch LCD screen with the all-screen design, rounded corners, and the notch at the top with your Face ID camera and front-facing camera brought from the iPhone 10 series. The pixel density on this is 326 pixels per inch compared to the iPhone 12's 460 pixels per inch, which you do need a really good eye in order to notice those differences. And this is a budget phone, so I'm not really too picky on what the pixel density is. The screen too is also an LCD screen instead of an OLED screen. What an OLED screen does for you is basically it turns off the individual backlight pixels to give you deeper blacks and a higher color contrast, which this phone doesn't have. But again, this is a budget phone, so I'm not going to be too picky on this. Another thing that this phone doesn't have is the display panel is a 60 Hz refresh rate panel compared to the iPhone 13 Pro, 14 Pro, and 15 Pro's 120 Hz refresh rate panel. Again, this is a Pro model iPhone feature that you have to spend almost, $1,000 to get. So I'm not too picky on this, but it is something you may notice is that the scrolling animations on an iPhone 10R are going to feel a little bit laggier compared to one of these Pro iPhones like an iPhone 15 Pro, for example. As for color quality, I would say it's kind of like your typical phone screen. It does have P3 wide color gamut, so it can display a broad range of colors, and the display brightness can get up to 625 nits of brightness. So color quality in this wise, I would say it's decent at best. And then performance. iOS 17 still holds up decently well on this phone. You can literally pick up this phone, use it for a bit, scroll through some apps, scroll through some web pages, and things still load decently fast with very minimal lag. This phone too also supports iOS 18. However, I think iOS 18 is going to be the last major update this phone gets, and it's going to likely get another year or two of app updates after that. So realistically, this phone is probably going to last you 1 to 2 years, which isn't really long, so you may want to possibly consider an iPhone 11 or an iPhone 12. It is cool though how Apple has designed this phone to last 10 years compared to other smartphone manufacturers will last me like 3 to 5 years with the latest updates. It's also cool too how ever since the iPhone 8, Apple's processors in these phones have been so good that even when they're running the latest version of iOS, there's really minimal lag. One thing I really want to do too with this phone is test out different apps, but unfortunately I hit a roadblock. This phone, I'm borrowing it from a phone repair shop I used to work for, and they had App Store purchases disabled, so I was unable to download any common apps like Facebook and games that could really maybe push this phone to its limits. But I will tell you though, from my experience of using the iPhone XR back in 2019, where it was pretty new, I didn't have any issues with performance whatsoever, and I don't think you're really going to have many issues now, even though the phone is a little bit older and the iOS updates are probably taking up a little bit more processing power than what they used to. Another thing you really need to keep in mind too with this phone is this phone still uses 4G, which is a little bit older and it doesn't have the 5G attendance that the iPhone 12 and newer iPhones have. However, I don't think that's too big of a concern. 4G is still really common and it's definitely still really usable. However, with 5G, you do get better speeds and there's a broader range of speeds that 5G can cover. So let's say you're in the cities, for example, you're going to get a lot faster speeds of 5G compared to a 4G phone. But further out in the country where things are wider and they need to have wider broadband antennas, there's not going to be much of a difference. The camera on this phone is another thing that's held up decently well. It has a 12 megapixel sensor on the back, which is something Apple has used up until just recently, and you can take some really high quality photos with this phone with the smart HDR features. It has front and back portrait photography, however, only works with humans. You cannot take portrait photos of objects. Going into a little bit more specs on the back camera, it has digital zoom up to 5x, 4K video recording at 60 frames per second, slow-mo video of up to 240 frames per second, and stereo recording to pick up better audio, as well as some other basic camera functions. The front camera is a 7 megapixel camera that can film 1080p video of up to 60 frames per second, and it has true depth cameras for things like Face ID and Animoji. The camera on this phone is definitely still decent, however, it is missing out on some newer iPhone camera features, like the ability to take a portrait photo of objects and get that nice bokeh effect, the night mode for better low light photography at nighttime, and the ultra wide camera for wider shots, as well as cinematic video to get that bokeh effect around the subject in videos. If you are curious about what the speakers and microphones sound like on this phone, here's a quick recording of the microphone. What I'm doing right now is a test to see the microphone quality and how well does it sound on here. I think it sounds pretty good just like every other iPhone, but let me know what you guys think. And then here's a speaker test compared to my iPhone 15 Pro. And then one thing I know a lot of you are really curious about is battery life. Unfortunately, I only had this phone for a short period of time, so I couldn't get a super good idea of battery life, but I can share my own data as well as data from others online. So the phone I have, I used it for about 40 minutes of screen on time after I unplugged it, and it went from 85% to 77%. My prediction is this phone, battery life wise, for most people, is going to be enough to last you throughout the day, but you may have to use low power mode in the evening. And online, a lot of people said that they get like 4 to 6 hours of screen on time, and that's with their battery health at around 80%. So all this though is going to depend on how often you use your phone, what you use your phone for, and the battery health of your phone as well. So what do I mean by battery health? Well, as batteries age over time and they're used, they hold less capacity. And this is something you really want to think about before you go out and buy a used iPhone. The iPhone XR I have here holds 83% of its battery health compared to what is new, and most shops out there will sell the phone above 80% battery health, including the ones I linked down below. But this is something you're definitely going to want to keep in mind because a new battery from Apple costs $89, and from a third-party repair shop it costs around $60 to $80 for a new battery. And speaking of the cost to replace things on this phone, repairability is another thing I really want to talk about. Luckily, this phone is a lot more repairable compared to the newer iPhones out there. However, parts and repair costs are still really expensive, so you definitely want to have a screen protector in a case on this thing. To give you an example here, a screen from Apple costs $200, which is surprisingly more than what the phone is actually worth, and from a third party, it's even $140. And this is kind of the story of a lot of other things too with this phone, like the back glass, the charge port, basically anything that needs to get repaired. It's going to be more to fix it than what this phone is actually worth. The only thing I can really think of that's worth less than what this phone is worth is both the battery and the camera. Now you can go over buying options, buying advice, and comparing this iPhone to some other used iPhones out there on the market. The first buying option you can consider is to shop locally on Facebook Marketplace, and this is typically where you're going to find the best deals, and you can oftentimes get the phone within a day. However, there is a lot of stress of having to message the seller, to go drive out and meet the seller to test the device and then come back. And there is no warranty, so if you have any defects or issues afterwards, you're basically screwed. And if you want to return the phone, there is no return window. That's where an online store like PlugTech may come in handy. It is a bit more expensive, but you do get a 30-day money-back guarantee, a 1-year warranty for defects, as well as a fully tested and professionally reset iPhone. They have this thing too called iPhone Star Packs that give you a pre-installed screen protector, a case, and a fast charger bundled with your iPhone for cheaper than what it typically costs to buy them individually from Amazon. As I'm making this video, they currently have a deal where if you click my affiliate link down below and you make an order of over $100 or more, you get a $10 discount. From there, they will go package up and ship your order, and they typically arrive within 2 to 4 business days in the US. And then finally, we have Amazon, which gives you a lot of the same benefits as a business, where they have a 90-day warranty for manufacturer's defects / money back guarantee, and the devices typically arrive within 2 to 4 business days. I'll leave links to both Amazon and PlugTech down below. And then comparing this phone to other used iPhones out there on the market, there are a few things I want you to keep in mind. The first one is, what are the features you really value in a smartphone? How long you're going to hold on to the phone for? And what is the resale value of the phone going to be once you're done? The first phone I'm going to compare this to is the iPhone 11, and this you can find for roughly $230. It's very similar to the iPhone XR, however, it does have an added wide angle camera, night mode for better nighttime photography, and Smart HDR for better high quality photos. But more importantly, what the iPhone 11 has is an upgraded processor. Instead of the A12 processor in the iPhone XR, the iPhone 11 has the A13 processor, which is likely going to give you an extra year of support. So instead of having a phone that's going to last you 1 to 2 years, you now have a phone that's going to last you about 2 to 3 years. And this leads me into something a lot of people don't realize when buying a used iPhone. People think they're set because the iPhone they're buying still gets the latest iOS updates, but there's something they don't really realize. Let me give you a story here. Let's say you go out and buy the iPhone XR, right? You use the phone for a year and a half, and by then it doesn't get the latest iOS updates, and you're starting to notice that some of your apps aren't getting the latest updates as well. So what you do is you decide to try to sell the phone, you list it, and no one's really biting, and everybody's giving you like really low offers, and no one really wants to buy the phone because it doesn't get the latest iOS updates anymore. Here's where my recommendation comes in. If you can afford it, buy a used iPhone that's going to last you a year longer than what you plan on using it for. It's going to be a whole lot easier trying to sell an iPhone that still gets the latest iOS updates than one that doesn't, and people are going to be much more willing to give you money for it. So here's another thing you could consider buying instead of a used iPhone XR. You could get an iPhone SE 2020 or iPhone SE 2022. These are older looking iPhones with the home button and this kind of older, big bezel screen design thing, but you do get newer internals for a lot cheaper. For example, here the iPhone SE 2020 / iPhone SE second generation. You can find these for roughly $120 on the used market, but it has the same processor as an iPhone 11, so you're getting that 2 to 3 years of support that an iPhone 11 has for $100 cheaper. And then another phone too, the iPhone SE 2022 / iPhone SE third generation, which you can find for roughly $190, so it is a bit more, but it has the same processor as an iPhone 13. So it's going to last you like 4 to 5 years for a lot cheaper. And it has 5G connectivity too. These two phones, the iPhone SE 2020 and the iPhone SE 2022, are my top recommendations for maybe like a kid or a grandparent, someone who's going to want a phone that's cheap to replace and is going to last them a long time. And then the final phone I'm going to recommend here is the iPhone 12. This you can find for roughly $280. It has a more modern, boxier looking design. It has the A14 processor, which is going to likely last you 3 to 4 years. It has 5G connectivity, and it has an OLED display, which looks a lot nicer. The iPhone 12 would probably be my top recommendation for anyone who's looking for a high quality phone in the budget range. So if there's one thing you can learn from all this, is the iPhone XR still holds up decently well in 2024, or there's some better options you could consider around this price range that are going to be longer lasting. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I'll leave a playlist up on screen of more iPhone reviews, and goodbye.